There are stories that time refuses to bury. You know, those half-forgotten legends that cling to the edges of small towns, whispered in gas stations, and remembered in the hush of long drives home. Stories that begin like a rumor and end like a nightmare. This one comes from a quiet corner of southern Illinois. A place of open fields, sagging barns, and nights, so still you can hear the wind pass through the corn. If you have ever driven through that kind of darkness, you will understand. The road seems endless. The stars feel too close, and every rustle in the ditch sounds like it might be something alive. Most Americans have never heard of Enfield, and honestly, that is how the locals like it. It is small, unassuming, a dot on the map between here and nowhere. But for a few terrifying weeks, in the spring of 1973, this ordinary town became the stage for one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in American folklore. Before we begin, tell me, what time is it where you are listening? Are you hearing this in the daylight, where every mystery feels smaller under the sun? Or is it deep into the night? The kind of hour when the world is quiet enough for old stories to find their way back. Wherever you are, whatever the time, consider this your invitation to cross over for a while, because what happened in Enfield, Illinois, is the kind of story that does not stay buried. This is the Enfield horror. Illinois has always been two different worlds stitched together by a long, uneasy line. Up north, you have the skyline of Chicago, the roar of highways, the heartbeat of modern America. But drive south, past the suburbs, past the last McDonald's, and the endless miles of farmland, and the land changes. It becomes slower, older, little lonelier. Here, the ground is rich and the air heavy, and the people know the sound of every passing train by heart. It is the kind of place where stories take root. The woods stretch deep and dark, and sometimes you get the sense that not everything living in them belongs to this century. Even before Enfield had paved roads, the native tribes spoke of creatures that stalked the rivers and haunted the bluffs. They told of a winged beast called the Piasa bird, a monster painted in red and black on the cliffs above the Mississippi, with the body of a dragon, the face of a man, and eyes that burned with hunger. Later came the big, muddy monster, seen near Murfreesboro, a massive, shaggy figure that rose from the river like a drowned giant. And then there was the Tuttlebottoms monster, a half-ape, half-pig creature said to roam the lowlands near Saline County. Down by the Missouri border, people whispered about Momo, a 7-foot thing that smelled like death and left nothing but silence behind. Most folks laughed off these tales. Others did not, because every time one of those stories came back, there was always someone swearing they would seen something that could not be explained. And so, when 1973 arrived, when people started hearing strange noises in the woods near Enfield, nobody thought much of it at first. Strange sounds were not news out here. Coyotes cried, owls screamed, old houses settled in their foundations. But what was coming was not a coyote or an owl or the wind. What was coming did not sound like anything anyone had ever heard before. It started, as these things often do, on an ordinary evening, April 25th, 1973. A Wednesday, the kind of night you would not remember, unless something unforgettable decided to happen. Henry McDaniel lived just outside of town, in a modest white house crouched near the edge of a patch of woodland. He was a plain man, steady, practical, a father of 2. He would served his time in the army, worked hard, paid his bills, and was not the kind to make up wild stories. But that night, when he came home, a little after 9, his children were crying. They said they would heard something outside. Something trying to get in. Not a knock, not a thump. A scratching, long, slow, deliberate, like claws dragging across the wood. Henry frowned. Probably a raccoon, he thought, or a stray dog. Still, something about the way his kids described it made him uneasy. Then he heard it too. That sound scrape. Scrape. Scrape coming from the front porch. He grabbed his flashlight, muttered something under his breath, and opened the door. What he saw next would follow him for the rest of his life. There, in the yellow light of the porch, stood a creature that did not belong to this world. It was small, maybe 4.5 feet tall, but compact, powerful, wrong. Its body was covered in thin, grayish hair that caught the light like steel wool. Its face was off, not quite animal, not quite human, and its eyes, good God, those eyes glowed pink, like twin lanterns in the fog. Henry froze. The creature stood there, just staring back at him. For a moment, it was like the world held its breath. Then he saw the rest of it. The arms were short but muscular, ending in hands tipped with claws long enough to scratch metal. But the legs there were not two of them. There were three thick, jointed limbs, bent backward like a frog's, each ending in a strange, three-toed foot. It shifted its weight, and Henry realized it was ready to leap. He slammed the door, shouted for his wife to get the children into the bedroom, and grabbed his .22 rifle from the corner. When he opened the door again, the creature was moving toward the fence line. Henry took aim, fired once, twice, 4 times. The sound cracked through the still night. The creature hissed a sound like steam from a boiling kettle, but it did not fall. It turned those glowing eyes toward him, hissed again, and then it bent those unnatural legs, sprang high into the air, and vanished into the dark. By the time the police arrived, the McDaniels' home looked like the aftermath of a bad dream. The porch was scarred with long claw marks, deep, ragged lines carved into the wood as though something had tried to peel its way inside. The siding bore scratches, and near the front steps were prints pressed into the soft earth. The officers knelt beside them with their flashlights, their beams cutting pale circles into the dirt. What they saw made them go silent for a long moment. The tracks were nothing like a dog's or a cat's. They were large, oddly shaped, with 6 toes instead of 4. And strangest of all, the pattern suggested 3 points of contact, not 2. It was as if something with an extra leg smaller and slightly behind the others had walked there. Henry told them what he had seen, the size, the color, the eyes that burned pink under the porch light, and the way the creature moved, how it jumped. He swore he would hit it at least once, maybe twice, but there'd been no blood. The bullets had done nothing. It just hissed at me, he said quietly, and then it was gone. The officers did not know what to make of it. They were polite, professional, but the disbelief in their eyes was impossible to hide. Even so, they made plaster casts of the tracks, took photographs, and logged the report. But before the sun had even risen, another call came in. One that made the whole situation stranger. Just a few houses down from the McDaniels lived a 10-year-old boy named Greg Garrett. That same evening, just 30 minutes before Henry's encounter, Greg had been walking home, cutting across a vacant lot to save a few minutes. It was already dark, and the grass was wet from the evening dew. He had nearly made it to his back porch when something lunged out of the shadows and knocked him off his feet. He did not see it clearly. He felt it first, the weight, the smell, the sound, a harsh hiss, like steam escaping a pipe. Then claws cold, hard scraped across his sneakers, shredding the canvas. Greg kicked, screamed, scrambled to his feet, and ran. He did not stop running until he reached his house. When his mother found him, his shoes were torn apart, his voice shaking. He told her what had happened, and though she tried to calm him, one look at those shoes told her he would encountered something. The next morning, when police came to ask questions, Greg's story lined up eerily well with what Henry McDaniel would later describe. A gray creature, short and stocky, glowing eyes, a hiss like a snake, 2 separate houses, 2 witnesses who did not even know they were part of the same story. Sheriff Roy Poshard took both accounts and made a note in his report. He did not believe them, not really, but he also could not dismiss them. There were marks, tracks, torn shoes, terrified faces. Whatever had happened, it had left fingerprints in the world. He advised both families to keep quiet to avoid stirring panic. But word travels fast in a small town, especially when fear is involved. A few days passed. Life in Enfield went on, at least on the surface. But inside the McDaniel house, the nights felt longer. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside, made Henry's hand twitch toward his rifle. Then, in the early hours of May 7th, it came back. It was around 3 in the morning when Henry woke to the sound of dogs barking, a deep, frantic chorus rising from a neighbor's yard. He grabbed his flashlight and rifle and stepped outside. The air was cool, the moon low and thin. The barking grew louder as he neared the back fence, and then he saw it. Just beyond the tracks of the Illinois Central Railroad, the creature stood again. Gray, low to the ground, but unmistakable. It was moving slowly this time, its 3 legs carrying it in a kind of uneven rhythm, the pink glow of its eyes catching the faint moonlight. Henry froze. His finger hovered on the trigger. He could have shot it, but he did not. Something about the way it moved, deliberate but not hostile, made him hesitate. "I saw something moving out on the railroad track," he would later say. "It stood there, looked at me for a bit, then it turned and started down the track, not in a hurry, not afraid, just moving on. And then it was gone again, leaping, vanishing into the trees, leaving nothing but silence behind." The next day, Henry told his story to a local radio station. By evening, it was everywhere. A creature in Enfield. 3 legs, eyes like red flashlights. Bullets could not kill it. The phones at the police station rang for hours. Reporters came, hunters came, and soon, the little town of Enfield became something it had never been before. Famous. They came from all over. Farmers, soldiers, students, self-declared monster chasers. Each one convinced they would be the one to find it, to shoot it, to prove it existed. Trucks lined the back roads. Flashlights flickered through the trees. The quiet farmland of southern Illinois turned into a carnival of fear and curiosity. Sheriff Pochard was furious. He would try to contain the story, but now the woods were crawling with armed men, shouting to one another, firing into the dark at anything that moved. When reports came in of gunfire near the McDaniel property, he drove straight out there with his deputies. They found a group of 5 men, wild-eyed, waving rifles, pointing into the brush. They swore they would seen it, that same creature, gray and squat, with eyes that glowed like coals. They said it had stepped toward them, slowly, almost curious, until they opened fire. The bullets, they claimed, did nothing. The creature just bounded away, vanishing like smoke. Pochard looked into the undergrowth. There was nothing. No blood, no tracks, no sound, but the hum of cicadas. He sighed, ordered the men to lower their weapons, and arrested them for violating local gun laws. But by then, it did not matter. The story had taken on a life of its own. Every headline added a new layer. Enfield monster stalks, rural Illinois, town under siege by 3-legged beast. Locals hunt the unknown. The line between witness and believer blurred. Fear had gone viral before anyone had a word for it. For the people of Enfield, this was no longer a story. It was a haunting. Among the curious who came to Enfield was a man named Rick Rainbow, a radio personality from Kokomo, Indiana. He would heard the story broadcast on the airwaves and decided he could not stay away. He brought a small team, his tape recorder, and an unshakable curiosity that bordered on obsession. When they arrived, the town already felt tense, like a wound that would not heal. Locals avoided eye contact, locking their doors before sunset. The air smelled of damp soil and cigarette smoke, and the nights seemed heavier than usual, thick, as if the darkness itself was listening. Rick and his companions went searching near the edge of the old railroad tracks, the same stretch where Henry McDaniel had seen the creature vanish. A mile or so out, they stumbled upon an abandoned house, its windows broken, its roof sagging under years of neglect. It was the kind of place that seemed to exhale when you entered, as if it were alive but tired of breathing. That is where they heard it. A cry high-pitched, unearthly, echoing through the trees. Not human, not animal, something caught between. It rose and fell in waves, trembling, metallic, as though coming from deep inside a throat that did not belong on earth. And then, just for an instant, they saw movement. Something gray, something low to the ground, darting past the ruined porch and vanishing into the woods. Rick raised his recorder, his hands shaking, and captured the sound. Later, when he played it back, the tape hissed and crackled, and beneath the static, you could hear that voice again. A shriek that made the hair on your arms rise. A voice that did not want to be forgotten. Rick sent the tape to Loren Coleman, one of the most respected cryptozoologists in the country. Coleman listened in silence, then rewound it and listened again. He said it was unlike anything he would ever studied. It was not a bird. It was not a coyote. And it certainly was not human. He came to Enfield himself, met Henry McDaniel, walked the property, took photographs of the scratches that were still visible on the door. While standing in the woods one night, Coleman heard the same eerie sound for himself. High, distant, echoing like a banshee. He did not see the creature, but he did not forget that sound either. After that, the noise stopped. The tracks disappeared, and Enfield, slowly, quietly, began to return to sleep. For a few months, the story of the Enfield horror burned bright across newspapers and late-night radio. But by the time summer rolled around, the excitement faded. There were no more sightings, no more screams in the night. The reporters packed up, the monster hunters drifted away, and what had once been a sensation became a curiosity, a campfire tale. Still, it lingered. Henry McDaniel never changed his story. He never tried to profit from it, never exaggerated it. He simply told it as it happened, over and over, each time the same. And he never slept easy again. Years passed, people forgot, and then, slowly, the questions began. Had it been a hoax? A prank blown out of proportion? Was Henry drunk? Delusional? Lonely? Had Greg Garrett made up his story after hearing the adults talk? Some said yes. Some said no. And then came the researchers. In 1978, a group from Western Illinois University published a study on the case, labeling it a classic example of social contagion, mass hysteria, born from fear and suggestion. They claimed that the only credible sighting was McDaniel's first report. Everything else, they said, was rumor feeding rumor, imagination infecting imagination. But if it was hysteria, what about the scratches on the siding? The tracks? The tape? No one could answer that, and perhaps no one wanted to. Over the years, theories multiplied like vines. The simplest one, the one skeptics cling to, suggests that the creature was nothing more than a misidentified animal. A kangaroo, they said, escaped from a private collector or a traveling zoo. After all, kangaroos have long tails, powerful legs, and can leap extraordinary distances. Seen in the half-light, it might explain the third leg, the tracks, even the strange movement. But Henry swore he knew what a kangaroo looked like. And besides, kangaroos do not hiss. They do not have claws that can gouge wood, and they do not leave six-toed tracks in the mud. Others thought it might have been an ape, perhaps one that had escaped captivity. There was precedent. Back in the 1940s, Mount Vernon, Illinois, had reported a string of cattle mutilations blamed on wild apes that locals claimed roamed the foothills. Those creatures, witnesses said, could leap 20 feet in a single bound, but none had ever been caught. There were wilder theories, of course. Some whispered that the Enfield horror was not from here at all, that it was not flesh and blood, but something from another dimension or another planet, that it had slipped through, somehow, stayed long enough to terrify a few people, and then gone back to wherever it came from. That, they said, would explain why bullets could not harm it, why the tracks seemed wrong, why it appeared for 1 month and never again. But these are theories born of wonder and fear, the kind that live in the space between reason and belief, the space where stories like this survive. Sometimes I think about Henry McDaniel, standing on that porch all those years ago, a simple man with a simple life, holding a rifle in his trembling hands, staring into the unknown. He did not ask to see it. He did not want to believe it. But once you have looked into the dark and seen something staring back, you never really stop seeing it. I think about Rick Rainbow holding that recorder in the woods, the tape spinning as that impossible sound filled the night. And I think about all the people who came after scientists, reporters, skeptics, each trying to explain what happened in Enfield in the spring of 1973. Maybe it was a kangaroo. Maybe it was a monster. Maybe it was just fear, amplified by the dark. But fear has power. It changes what we see. It shapes what we remember. And sometimes, just sometimes, it leaves behind something that can't be explained at all. Whatever the Enfield horror was, it came and went like a ghost. One that left no body, no bones, only a question that still echoes through time. Because something did happen in Enfield. The police saw the tracks. The people heard the cries. And Henry McDaniel, till the day he died, swore he had seen it with his own eyes. Half a century later, the town is quiet again. The woods have grown back. The old McDaniel house still stands, though no one talks about it much. Sometimes, on certain nights, the wind makes a sound as it moves through the trees, high, thin, and distant. If you are not careful, you might mistake it for the whistle of a train, or for something else entirely, something watching, something waiting. And when you hear it, maybe you will remember this story. And maybe, just maybe, you will understand why I still think about that night. Because what happened in Enfield was not just a legend, it was a moment. A small, unexplainable crack in the surface of the world. And once you have seen that crack, once you have glimpsed what is behind it, you can never quite close it again. This is the story of the Enfield horror. And somewhere, out there in the dark, it is still listening.